of the PTSO tonight.
I'm one of the two co-presidents of the PTSO.
Unfortunately, my co-president, Natalia Espinal, cannot be here tonight because she is
an elementary school teacher,
first grade at Burr Elementary, and it's her curriculum night tonight, so she's in front of a room full of parents too.
So
Natalia has a ninth grader and a senior here, and I have an 11th grader, and we each have days still.
So
please
make a note of
that email.
Please, sorry,
I'm going to move around and miss the mic.
Please make a note
of that email address. We would love to hear from you if you've got questions or suggestions.
So my
presentation tonight is just to hit the highlights of what the PTSO does, what we do, who we are, how we raise money, how it's spent.
So the first thing here is maybe the most important thing. Each parent and guardian of a student here at Newton North is a member of the PTSO. Automatically, I'll talk about paying dues later, but no one gets kicked out if you don't pay dues. You are always a member of the PTSO. And this slide lists the four things that we do, the main things that we do. I think the most important one is the first one. We are here to help Newton North be the best it can be. We accomplish that by sponsoring programming, communicating with you and the educators at Newton North, and by raising money to support students, staff, and the school. So communication absolutely key. Most important thing tonight. So if you're not receiving the PTSO's weekly email newsletter, that's the QR code on the left to subscribe. Tiger News goes out every Tuesday, and sometimes we have special editions to call attention to a specific event. If you're not a part of the directory membership toolkit, that is the other QR code. If you had a kid at Day or Bigelow, you automatically get migrated in. But if you need to join or would like to join, that's the other QR code. So these are the highlights of our programming this year. Northside Porchside is coming up fast on Saturday, October 5th. It's a parent social, kind of like a mystery dinner that some of the elementary schools do. So we're all going to start at one house for food and a short message from Dr. Turner, and then we move to smaller groups spread out at other locations across the north side of town. It is not too late to register. There was a flyer on the table when you came in. You can pick it out and pick one up on your It was also in this week's Tiger News, and I want to take a moment and express gratitude to Connie and Janine, who are 9th grade parents and are organizing Porchside this year. So thank you. I love the enthusiasm of the 9th grade class already. You'll hear more about the other events as they get closer, but I want to talk about celebration for a minute. That is the free after prom, senior prom party, and it's held here at Newton North. And it requires a small army of volunteers to make to make it happen. The idea is that parents of 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders pay it forward by volunteering when their kids are young, and then get to enjoy their kids' senior prom night. So please pay attention when the emails start coming out about volunteering for that. Too far. Okay. So this is a quick breakdown of the revenue and expenses from last year. The dues campaign, EdX, Educational Excellence and Celebration, are our largest sort of things that bring money in. The dues campaign is nearly half of our revenue source, and that's on now. It really pulls the bulk of our work. You can donate. We've got a QR code out on the table up front, or you can donate through our website if you're interested. The largest expenses are celebration, staff appreciation, and grants to teachers, and then also student support. So student support includes things like the Dover Legacy Scholars, METCO, ELL, and Library. I'll talk more about edX On the next slide. Staff appreciation comes up kind of quick. We provide dinner for teachers on the night of conferences. So please, again, pay attention to that, and please donate if you can. It's a great way to show appreciation for the teachers and all that they do. Okay, so do strive. Now it's our biggest fundraiser, as I just said. QR code here, also on the table. Anyone who donates before the 30th, the end of the month, will enter you into a drawing for a gift card to Auto Pizza. And then edX campaign, I want to talk about just a little bit. Each year, the edX campaign, Educational Excellence Campaign, raises funds for a need within Newton North that has been identified by Dr. Turner. 2 years ago, edX raised money for materials for the physics department to conduct labs. Last year, edX raised money for the fine arts department. Dr. Turner will announce this year's edX campaign at Porchside. And we all look forward to hearing what it is, because it really makes a difference in the experiences of students and educators at Newton North. So stay tuned. Okay. Those are the highlights. Important dates. Coffee tomorrow morning. Porchside on the 5th. Multicultural night in November. Save the date. Get in touch with us with any questions. And then another way to stay informed is through the class liaisons and the class Facebook page. Thanks very much for your time and attention. And you can catch me at the end if you have anything else. Thank you so much.
I always say that porch night is one of the nights that my wife likes to attend on my job, and so if you come, you may get to meet my wife for the one time of the year. Pass it to Amy Winston.
Yeah, I'm going to talk and text all the 9th grade parents that are at home all at the same time, because we're still having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to go through some of the logistics of Newton North as your students have talked to you about your schedule, and back in the spring we talk a lot about how different the Newton North schedule is and the block schedule and those pieces. So I'm going to go over the different pieces of it quickly here just as a review, so that when your student comes home and is talking about their schedule and their blocks, you have a general idea. The Lexicate people are texting me to tell me what's coming through, so if I'm multitasking, that's why. So I'm going to talk particularly about the special blocks that you might see in your student's schedule. We have advisory on Mondays for 20 minutes. You heard Henry talk about his advisory with freshmen. I have an advisory with sophomores. Advisory groups have 2 adults with them, and the goal is for those 2 adults to be with them for 4 years and the same group of students for 4 years. The physical location in the building might change, but the important part, the people, stay together. And in advisory on Monday, we review announcements. We make sure that all of our students have made their win selections for the week, which I'll talk about. And it's an opportunity to build connections with another adult in the building, with other students. The advisory groupings are completely randomly assigned so that it's a mix of kids that, you stay with for 4 years, but they don't necessarily have something in common. And our advisory program does work to develop those social emotional skills with students. I can talk about, in my advisory, sometimes we play games, sometimes we talk about what we've done in the last week, sometimes we talk about supporting each other at sporting events. So for example, last Friday night we had a volleyball game here at North, and I saw over half of my advisory at the Friday night volleyball game. And they were super excited to see me, which was kind of fun. And it was fun for me to see them all together, cheering on some of their classmates who were playing volleyball, or their advisory mates. We also use it as a place and a location where we respond to school-based, local, and national news. When there are things that we want to be able to process as a school, we use that time together in advisory. Win block is something that came into our schedule during and after the pandemic. So WIN stands for What I Need, and it is really driven by student choice on a week-to-week basis. If you do read my weekly updates, you'll see that there's typically reminders to students to choose their WINs. They have the opportunity to choose up to 2 weeks worth of WIN at a time, and they have the opportunity to continuously change what those selections are right up until 1 hour before WIN block. So for example, on a Wednesday when WIN block starts at 10:20, they can change it up until 9:20 that morning, like, oh my goodness, I really need to see my physics teacher because we have a test later today and I have a question. They can do that. It is really driven by student choice. And we have all kinds of opportunities of things that students can do during WIN block, whether it be go to the art classrooms, go to the gym, go to get extra help, do yoga, everything and anything. Well, the track is closed right now, but usually we have a walking group on the track, all different kinds of things that are really designed to provide your student with enrichment activities, support in different ways. Examples of enrichment, for example, all of our student leaders who are focused on sustainability in our school, they meet once a week during WIN with adult support to talk about how we can make Newton North a more sustainable, green-focused place. So that is like an enrichment activity that those students are opting into during their time. So there's all kinds of options. If you want to know what your student is doing with their WIN blocks, you can see it in Aspen. I actually haven't sent this out in a weekly update yet, but I will. If you go into Aspen and go to the student's schedule, and then underneath it, it says WIN schedule, and you can see exactly how your student is using their time. It's a great conversation. Why are you going to see Mr. Turner every single WIN? Or finding out, wait a second, you told me that you're struggling in Spanish, but I don't see any WINs with your Spanish teacher, right? So those are all the kinds of conversations that you can have with your students, which goes to this piece of, that I would go back to WIN for 1 second, which is that students might be required to go to WIN, so a teacher might pull a student into WIN and lock them in if they have makeup work to do, if the teacher notices that they're struggling, if the teacher needs to connect with the student. A counselor could pull a student into WIN, a dean can pull, we can pull people into WIN. So it is a place that it is driven by student choice, but sometimes I say it's, it is directed choice at times. And counselors are also available to help students if they're struggling to figure out how to use their WINs. If they have too many people they need to see, there's a lot of us available to help them. Tiger Block is our totally flexible, optional time. And I know the first couple weeks of school, this is like the most common freshman parent phone call to the main office. When your child is telling you, I can leave school, and you're like, are you sure you can leave school? The answer is yes. Tiger is the one time in our schedule that freshmen have open campus, meaning they can go home if they don't have any place where they need to be. But the buses and vans do leave after Tiger Block. A lot of clubs meet during Tiger Block. Sports teams will be leaving for away athletic events. It is an opportunity to meet with teachers. It's kind of a really fun atmosphere around here during Tiger Block because there's so much going on. The pattern of the year, so at North we have quarters, semesters, and full year courses, and we issue academic progress information to you as families twice per quarter, so progress reports at the midterm and term report cards at the end of the term. I know that Curry talked about the attendance standard with you. You'll see the indication of the attendance standard and attendance information on both those progress reports and report cards. Something else that's a little different at the high school is that your progress report that you see for your student, those midterm comments, may not have a ton of information on them if your student is doing well. They really are targeted at gathering information for students who are struggling. We do try to provide as much feedback as we can to families, but don't panic if a class is listed and there's no comments. It's a no news is good news scenario, and you are always welcome to reach out to parents, to teachers, to find out how your kid is doing. Whether it be the 3rd week of the quarter or the 6th week of the quarter, it doesn't matter. You are always welcome to reach out to teachers to check in. which brings us to communication. So you know that I send an update on the weekends. Henry sends newsletters more, not as on a regular schedule, more on an as-needed schedule. You get grade level specific information from Caree, and then we have our midterm comments and report cards, which are posted to Aspen. And my last slide is Parent Square, which is what I was simultaneously doing. So if you haven't registered your account for Parent Square yet, I encourage you to do so. We actually are doing like amazingly well. We have about 800 parents who haven't yet, which means we have like 2,000 who have registered their accounts, which, considering we're less than 6 months into using Parent Square, is awesome. And both Parent Square is sending communication to students and parents and guardians. There's Student Square and Parent Square. As students, it doesn't really matter. They can use Student Square or Parent Square. They do exactly the same thing. I strongly encourage you to adjust your notifications. So for posts and direct messages, those are kind of the two major communication forms in Parent Square, you can adjust your notifications and you can decide, do I want email? Do I want text message? Do I want app alerts if I install the app on my phone? Or do I want 2 out of the 3 or all 3 or 1? You decide how you want to get notified. Folks function in different ways, right, in terms of where the information is. That said, like, Parent Square is extremely searchable, so that if you're looking for something and you log in to either the app or on the computer, you can find things very quickly. Separate from the posts and direct messages are alerts. So what I've been sending you all sitting here, along with all the other 9th grade families at home, are alerts, which is like, I'm sending a text message to you right now because I really need to get information to you right now. You can't turn that off. Because that's really what we would use in an emergency. It's also what will be used on things like a snow day. Those are the alerts that go by, and they'll go by text, email, and or phone. If your child has been late to school or has had an absence marked that hadn't been excused, you may have received one of those attendance alerts. That's another way that we use the alert system to let you know if your student hasn't been in class and they got marked absent and you hadn't reported it to the house office yet. And we've also been sending messages home to make sure parents know when their child is tardy to school in the morning, because we know that many of you leave for work before your kids come to school. The kids might tell you they're getting to school on time, but our biggest tardiness issues are with first block, despite school starting at 9 o'clock. So that's an important piece. If your child hasn't submitted their phone number yet, they can still do that, and then they can decide if they want to get text alerts or app alerts or emails for the information that we send out to them. Okay? I think that's it, Henry.
All right. So as you start to think about what questions you have for us, I'll just close by saying that I remember reading an article years ago that talked about when our kids were young, it was clear how we were useful. You know, we were clear how we could help them and support them. And it becomes less clear when they get older. But the reality is they actually need us more now than when they were younger. It's just that it's on their own time when they need us. And so it's coming to events like this so that you have information that you're like, I'm not sure, you know, when I'm going to use what, but knowing that moment when they are, you know, feeling in despair, that you're there to support them and you know how to reach out to the counselor, to the dean, so we can form that partnership with you. So that's one of the big purposes and takeaways of tonight. And we're here to answer your questions. I'll walk around, answer your question, give you the microphone so you can ask your question, and then we will answer your questions. Start on the back.
For full year classes, is a term defined as a quarter or a semester? And what are the attendance standards per term? And for situations where there's family travel or non-North sporting events where they may have to miss a day of school for that, does that count as excused or unexcused?
So a quarter and a term are the same thing, kind of used interchangeably. So a full year course has 4 quarters or 4 terms in the year. And in terms of the attendance standard, I think I disconnected? Yeah. So a student receives an N, or not meeting the attendance standard, if they have 6 or more total absences in a class in a quarter, or 3 or more unexcused absences in a class in a quarter. So remember, classes meet 3 times a week. So to hit that 3 or more unexcused absences, that actually means the student has probably missed 5 days of travel, like if you're using your travel example, a full week of school. So you receive an N on your report card if you hit those bars for absences. But 1 N in 1 quarter in a full year course has no impact on your full year credit or your full year grade or any of those pieces. It's just a mark that you missed a significant amount of school in that quarter. When you start to go to 2 quarters in a full year course, you've now missed 2 weeks of unexcused or 4 weeks of excused absences. Then you start having a conversation with your dean and your counselor about your credits. But again, like, every single kid, every single class gets reviewed by the dean and the counselor to figure out, is this like a excused situation that we're gonna work with this kid on their credits, or is this a kid who's just choosing not to go to science class because they don't want to go to science class, right? And whether or not we have to think about credits. Does that cover it enough, Kari?
Thank you. I actually have 2 questions, but they're very unrelated. One is regarding when. I heard you say they could make changes up until, I think, a certain time limit?
Up until an hour before WIN starts on a given day.
Okay.
But they can't unschedule themselves, which is really good. So once they're scheduled somewhere, they have to go somewhere. WIN is the one time in the week where all the children have to be somewhere. There is no such thing for open campus for any children during WIN block.
So if they can't unschedule, what do they do? Who do they see?
So they can move themselves to something else. Like, they can say, like, you know, I had thought I was going to meet with Kari, but now I'm going to meet with Beth. So they just go into My Flex Learning on their phone or on their Chromebook, and they say, doop, doop.
So the other way that I would answer it too is that if, let's say that they know they have a test, and they're like, I feel really good about this test, so I'm going to just get some work done on Wednesday, and they realize, you know what, I'm actually not ready for this test, and I want to meet with this teacher, they can change their WIN block. And if the teacher is full, they can actually go to the teacher, and the teacher will then could say, you know, I'll override it and put you in my WIN block. So that's why a student would change. The other thing I would say is, because Amy talked about some of the enrichments like going to the gym or the pool, and the pool is actually, swimming is the most popular WIN block. It fills up really quickly, which is cool. And it's good that kids know that they want to get exercise so that they can keep the day going. And you know, those of you who have been in education know that at the end of the day, kids can get really, really tired because they've just been sitting. And so that sometimes is the right thing for them. But it's not the right thing to do every single day, right? And so that's why you want to monitor what they're doing. And if you notice, like, they're not utilizing their supports, or I heard you say that there is a sport that they're doing outside of school, then when's the time for them to get their work done. The biggest concern that parents shared with us pre this schedule was, my kid has so much homework, they're staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. That was, by and large, the most common complaint about this school. They're so stressed out, they're not getting enough sleep. So we changed the schedule. WIN block is the way to help reduce their workload at home. And so that's probably where what most kids use it for, and they're very strategic. But if you notice that they're using it, you know, for too many enrichments, then, you know, that's worth a conversation, and we can be helpful there.
So if a teacher, or there's sort of that directed WIN that somebody says, I need you to meet with me during WIN, how is the student notified, or is it upon them to go look at their WIN like immediately beforehand or that day of, even though they signed up for it on the weekend?
Great question. So In general, the norm is that teachers tell kids when they're pulling them in and locking them, for sure. And students are reminded to check MyFlex Learning immediately before WIN because, for example, if their teacher is absent that day for the WIN that they had signed up for, then we will have moved them somewhere else. To this point of nobody gets a free during WIN. So the best advice we give students all the time is that they should always check like in the morning to make sure that they're going to the right place. And I know some of your students had this issue the first week of school. Some freshmen were like, didn't look. They thought they remembered where they were going. So we do advise students to check it before they go to WIN to make sure they're going to the right place. Because sometimes last minute things happen.
Yes. I wanted to ask about the phenomenon of students getting dismissed for athletic games, right, for away games. You know, as a parent, it's upsetting to see them always getting dismissed, say, example, you know, on Fridays from their physics class. Can they possibly make it all up during WIN?
It's a great question, and I will say fall is the more common time when we're seeing teams getting dismissed, particularly for schools that don't have lights, and so therefore games are starting earlier. I will say that the Bay State Conference, in comparison to like the dual league conference where Newton South participates, they've made adjustments to their schedule so that we can start games later. So Mike Jackson, our athletic director, really knows that the pressure is to make sure that we minimize the interruption as much as possible. Though it does happen, and it happened in our old schedule as well. And so students know to reach out to the teacher. Teachers know who's going to be dismissed. They should have a conversation. The question about like what is to be made up, right? It may be notes that may just be about meeting with a teacher that could be done in a more in a shorter period of time because it's one-on-one. Or it could be on Schoology, or it could be work that they just need to do in class. We have found like there is certainly an irritation because when it happens on a regular basis, and a regular is a handful of times in the season, but we haven't heard as much of students not being able to catch up or keep up. And so I will say is that winter season, it's less of an issue. In the spring, it's less of an issue. Fall is where we do have the biggest, particularly golf. Like golf teams face it the most because you can't golf under the lights, and most of our matches are at private courses where there's only a certain period. So that some of those teams do experience it more than others, and some don't have games on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so that's how they're impacted as well. So it's a good question. We are monitoring it, and it's certainly an ongoing conversation with Mike Jackson and me just to make sure that we've addressed it as best as we can.
I do think it's really important to note that piece around the fact that our games are later. Like, yes, we get out later, but our games now are later. So like if we went back to our old schedule, the games were early, like the games were earlier when we got out earlier. So kids got dismissed before as well. So like it's not just unique to the current schedule for us, and that piece. The teachers are also amazing. Jackson sends out a schedule to all the teachers of all the teams' schedules of their dismissals so they know up front what those dismissals will look like.
Okay, so my question's regarding cell phone policy, and I'm really pleased that the school district has a new cell phone policy. My question is in regards to what the teachers are told, and I understand that it's kind of maybe a guideline or something that you give them, but if the message is you shouldn't have a cell phone in class, that you can use it in the hallway, cafeteria, whatever, you shouldn't use your cell phone in class. It's my understanding that some teachers are still allowing that, either not really asking kids to put it in the pockets or, well, we have 15 minutes left of class. If you want to get your phone, you can get it.
So great question. This is actually not a new policy for us. This is our second year with the phone pockets, and we have 300 teachers. And so with any change, it just takes time to build sort of the culture where we're doing it at 100%. Last year, we started off strong, and then it waned pretty quickly, and kids knew which classes you could have your phone, which you couldn't. This year, I would say it's far more improved, and also to the point that, just a side story, is that we did a press conference with the superintendent and two of our teachers, myself, and we got a bunch of questions about cell phones from adult media sources, and then the student media asked us a question totally unrelated. And they just said, like, cell phones are like, so, like, that's like old news now. We're like focused on like the next thing. And so and that's not every student, but I do think that we've made a big shift from where we were last year. My goal for this year is sustainability. If there are teachers, what I've said to department chairs is that we're in classes a lot, and so if we notice that it's not being used, then it's going to be a conversation. So it's become a professional expectation. It's not a guideline anymore. And we do have a culture where we do support sort of the science of teaching. There are things we know that work for kids, but there's also a craft. That's what gets kids to love love class. And so we want to support our teachers' independence, but there are some things we just say you have to do, and this is one of those things. So I do think that over time, we're going to get to the 100%.
And I'll just add that our group, class of 2028, is leading the pack, leading the school. Of course, this group came in from the middle school with familiarity with the cell phone restrictions, and we aren't having many in the freshman class. If there are any incidents, obviously I would follow up with them. But cell phones are largely being used as instructional tools in classrooms that teachers are allowing students to use them in the classroom. But generally, there's a cell phone ban. Students are expected to bring their cell phones into classrooms. Teachers have pockets, and students know what the expectation is. They're entering the classroom and putting their phones right in the pockets, and teachers aren't having many issues at all.
And I'd also say on the second, third, and fourth floor where they're not allowed in the hallways, so to your question about being in the hallways, like if a student says, can I go to the bathroom, they can't bring their phone with them. That was an inconsistent practice last year. So this year they are not allowed to bring them with them. We've had, I walk the hallways a lot, and I've had to tell very few students, or seen very few students on the second, third, and fourth floors in the hallways with their phones. So I do feel like we're in a better place. Still work to do. Here.
Yep. I can tell you that my senior does not like the policy, and I'm hearing about it, so that means that her teachers must actually be enforcing it this year, so that's great. My question is about, about athletics. So I have a senior and a freshman, and they have now both participated in 2 different sports, and I've also heard, lots of anecdotal stories from other parents in other sports. How much and what kind of communication should parents expect? So I will just say from my experience, my 9th graders playing a fall sport, which is our first experience with the fall sport, and we did get the tryout information and we were able to do that. I have not been communicated. I don't know her coach's name. I don't know where she's going to games. I know occasionally when she'll send me a screenshot that a classmate sent her. So I definitely don't want to be super involved, but I wonder if there are any kind of communication standards as far as athletics goes when it comes to communicating with parents.
So I'll start and then pass it to Amy. So if you've had children who have run for Newton North before, Joe Tranchita was our longtime track coach, legendary track coach. And I would always tell coaches when I would hire them that he is the model for communication, because he would write a newsletter every single week in which the kid who was the state champion got as much coverage as the kid who did a PR and it was their first time doing track. And so every kid felt seen, felt connected. And to me, that's what we should be expecting. What was hard prior to Parent Square is that most coaches who were not teachers were communicating through different means. And so we had no idea how they were communicating. Joe would just copy me and like half of Newton on all of his emails so we would see it. But like coaches were texting, and that's not safe for kids, and it's not safe for coaches for them to be texting each other on a personal phone. And so now with Parent Square, Amy and I are getting all of the communication from coaches, so we're actually now able to see who's communicating, and we've said that cell phone communication is not allowed. And so we have heard that it still has happened in some places, but texting with coaches is not allowed anymore. It's just through Parent Square. So, but to your point is that we'll be able to now see like who is communicating in what ways so that we can work with coaches. Some coaches are in the building, they're educators, and some coaches, this is, a small stipend that they get for a season, and that's the only time we see them. And so now this is a way for us to coach them a little bit more.
We're definitely better. I would say this fall is way better than we've been in terms of communication. And like I had to get 38 coaches on Parent Square in like 1 week's time between when we activated it and when preseason started. And with many of them not working in the system, they had to get on their NPS email, then they had to get on Parent Square, all those pieces. And I need your children to put in your phone numbers and download the app, because part of it is the coaches aren't going to do it if the kids aren't receiving it. Does that make sense? So like I sent a direct message to all 800 fall athletes last week saying like, if you haven't installed the app yet, you need to do so. This is how your coach is going to communicate with you. I don't think they believe me. So I think the more that we continue to, as a community, say that this is how we're going to communicate, we're going to use this one system, which I do think is a really powerful system. One of the things we haven't explicitly talked about tonight is our commitment to accessibility. So Parent Square translates everything for our students and families for whom English is not their first language. They can text me in their language, I text them in English. It goes back and forth nonstop. The same is true for our coaches who have students and families for whom English is not their first language. And things like Lexicate that we're using tonight, which is now working, by the way, is to provide that accessibility. So Parent Square is a really important piece of that accessibility part for our students and families. And I think we'll get there with the coaches. It's just going to take some time.
I had a question regarding when you said when teachers are absent and they're supposed to go to the cafeteria. What happens when they have 2 or 3 teachers in one day and they're the last periods of the day? My daughter called me and said, "Can you dismiss me?" Okay.
Mr. Rulak, can I take that?
Yeah, so when a teacher is out, we in the main office will keep a list of teachers who are absent that day, and student checks that list to see if the teacher's out, and if they're out, the expectation is that they go to the cafeteria where there is a roster. Someone is sitting with a roster of their class waiting to take attendance again to make sure that they're accounted for. Along the lines of freshmen not having open campus, and there's always a place that they're supposed to be. And there's always someone waiting for them to take attendance for a canceled class.
So the teacher app. So I'll talk about teacher absences because I know that's a question that we've received before. I'll also say is that there is a privilege to go in a school where we have open campus. So ninth graders see there's always a ninth grade bill in the SFA to give ninth graders open campus, and I work with them on it to teach them the bill writing process and then teach them the veto process. I believe that our job with ninth graders is to teach them the responsibilities of being high school students so that they can then be successful with open campus. Sometimes that's the annoyance of that I've got to do some things, which is I have to be in the cafeteria getting work done on a Friday. I will say that in schools that don't have open campus, if you have a substitute 3 blocks in a row, you're sitting in a classroom with a person you don't know, and it's even more disorderly because we can talk about substitutes sometimes being a challenge if you remember your high school substitutes. So like there are just things that sometimes you have to do. And so you did the right, you dismissed her. I wouldn't do that in the future. Yes. So so I'll touch upon that and then come back to a question that was asked about student absences. Is that certainly, during COVID, we saw a spike in educator absences. We also, at the same time with the new schedule, we have the same number of blocks, but fewer blocks in the day because we have longer blocks. And so what the benefit of that is that longer blocks allow for students to engage in more active activities, project-based activities, and fewer transitions. And so in terms of their stress levels, what the research shows is the more transitions they have, so if you have 6 transitions and you're going from Spanish to calculus to science, like that creates stress on your brain. This way it's a little bit slower transition. So those are the benefits. The challenge is that if you have 2 classes that are 3 classes where you're missing plus a win block, it really feels like you didn't have school that day. That's real. I will say that our teacher absences have significantly gone down since COVID. The vast majority of our teachers have 1 to 5 absences a year, and so that is generally illness related. And when contractually they have 15 absences and 3 personal days, and so people are here. The challenge is that we have a lot of teachers, and so sometimes you fall into that pattern. Or what's really hard is if they hurt them. I don't want anyone to hurt themselves, but they hurt themselves and they're out for a week, and then maybe it's 2 weeks, and we can't find someone for that class. Yeah. So that's right. I'm just responding to just the challenge to it, but sometimes it does happen. In terms of student absences, is just dismissing them does not count as an excused absence. It could count as an unexcused absence. So the state has really put Newton on notice last year. You may remember this if you were in Newton Public Schools, is that Newton became much more restrictive in what is considered an excused absence. So just excusing them, and one of the patterns we saw a few years ago was a student would have a test, a kid would ask, say, can you excuse me from class? And so they get excused from class and then come back to class. And so that's now something we are noticing and we are addressing. So if your kid says, please excuse me from class, don't do it. All right?
Which is that most teachers give the kids work to be doing via Schoology. So they actually have work that they should be doing during that time, whether they tell you that or not. But they do have stuff they should be working on.
All right. Know that we are here for you. This is a partnership, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the year. Thanks so much.